Hi, this is Edithson Abelard, and in this video we're going to discuss how do you create and collect items in Unity 3D. I'm really excited about this video because it's going to be the first of many that discuss more game design and development, going a little into the principles as well as how do you build depth within your game. So we're going to stay with this series for a few weeks, just so we have enough time to really touch on a lot of core concepts. So to begin, I created this model in Maya, and later on I'll show you how to create models in Maya and more importantly importing them into Unity 3D, because there are little tips and tricks that will help you understand why your model in Maya looks absolutely great, but when you bring it to Unity it's about 1 unit in size. Alright, so let's begin with doing a few things different. We're still going to add our lights, create other, directional light. But as you can see, when you have more shapes, the light doesn't really touch everywhere, and it actually seems to be a little stronger than it needs to be in some of these areas. Like these shadows are really dark, so we're actually going to duplicate our light, move it over, and just rotate it. As you can see, as we're rotating, the light is already softening. There you go. We can even bring down the intensity a little bit. As you can see before, you can see how harsh the shadows are. But now just by bringing up the intensity a little bit, you can see we still have some shadows. They're a little softer. I might even bring it down a little more. There you go. So we still have some shadows, but they're just a little softer. And if we want, we can actually go in and add more lights to the scene later on. But I think this is fine for now. Okay. Now, just for scale purposes, we're going to grab our first person controller, drop it on the scene. 0, 0, 0. I'll actually make sure this is at, okay, this is at 0. So now let's look at our first person. Now you can see scale wise, our first person character does fit quite well in here. There goes the ground. Okay, so now what we're going to do is add our collider for this. Now if you remember, for most of our other components, we were just going and grabbing ourselves a physics collider, and choosing box collider. Now if you realize, if we add a box collider, you see where it automatically gets placed, and that's because it's trying to compensate for this whole entire shape. And even if we grab this stage and add a collider, you notice this really isn't a box. So the box collider wouldn't work in this instance. But what we have here is a MeshCollider, which will then take our shape. There you go. It'll take our shape and create collision based on the actual geometry instead of a arbitrary geometric shape. So now we hit play. You'll see now we can walk up once you jump. We can walk up the platforms. Oh, just made it. You see our gem up here. You can see the rest of our stage. Now just to show you that the MeshCollider really is necessary, I'm going to go ahead and bring our first person controller up a little bit. And see, he just falls right through. So, and if I've mentioned this before, by checking and unchecking these, you actually enable or disable whatever the item is or the component is. Alright, perfect. But we're actually not going to use this. Instead, we're going to create a ball and have the ball roll around instead. So, sphere. See the size, maybe scale it up again so it looks a little bigger. Okay, perfect. I've gone already and created a ball texture, so we'll just add this to our sphere. Nice. Forgot to mention, now that we're not using our first person, we have to be more conscious of where our camera is and how it's pointing at the scene. So now you see our ball on the screen. Now there's no actual controls added to it, so we can't control it as of right now. So what we'll do is we'll go into component. We'll start with character, and we're going to add character motor. Yes, we're going to break that. Character motor. Then we'll do platform input control. And as you can see, now we can move our character around using the up and down arrows. You can jump, but it's kind of difficult to see exactly what's happening because the camera isn't really helping us in this situation. It's a static camera, but what we can do though is Unity comes with camera controls, and we can do this smooth look at or smooth follow. We'll start with smooth look at, and you'll see when we add this component, there's a target here. What we're going to do is take our sphere and actually first rename it to player. And give it a tag of player. 2 L's. Okay. Perfect. Now we grab our main camera. We click and drag our player right onto this target. Now when we hit play, you'll see as I move, so does the camera. Whoops, definitely fell. Alright, so that's smooth follow. All that does is it allows the camera to just follow you around. And as I get closer with the camera, you can see that the camera sees a little more detail. Okay. Alright, now the other thing we can do is add, still with our camera selected, our main camera, camera control. Now we're going to do smooth follow. In smooth follow, we're still going to do the same thing. Grab our camera, make sure it's selected, grab the player, drag right onto the target, and we're just going to deselect the look at script. Now hit play. Now you'll see the camera actually follows you around. Now it's definitely a little weird, the way the camera is moving around, but we'll talk about in later videos how do you fix this, and more importantly, how do you create a better experience with the camera, because we may end up having to do a little custom script just to control our camera. But there you go. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about our gem. Now, a few videos ago, we spoke about how we don't really want to just duplicate items. Control D. There's actually a better way to do it. And what we're going to talk about now is that better way. And that better way is actually to create a prefab, which we can then duplicate. And if we make any changes to the prefab, we can apply it to all the items on the stage. So we're just going to right click, create a prefab. We're going to call this gem. Items, find my gem, and drop it here. So now we have a prefab of our gem. And you'll notice I have a spin. I'll actually open this up. I have a spin JavaScript file already created. And basically what we have is transform.rotate accepts 3 parameters, X, Y, and Z. So what we're doing here is actually on the X-axis, we're not rotating. On the Y-axis, we're rotating 50 units times time.delta time, which really translates into 1 second. So every second we're going to rotate along the Y-axis 50 units, and of course the Z-axis 0. So we're going to go back. Now this is our gem prefab. We're going to take our spin, drop it on here, and then hit play. Actually, we can't hit play. There's nothing on there. So we'll just drop a gem here. Okay. Perfect. Hit play. So you can see our gem is rotating along the y-axis. I'm going to go back to our player and take off. We're going to take off our, actually wrong, not the player, on the main camera. Just look at instead of follow, just so it's not so so hard to see. Actually, it's not going to work very well either. Alright, we'll leave that on for now. Maybe change our player script from platform input. Maybe add first person input and see how that changes. Okay, there you go. Alright, so that's a lot better. First player input will work better in this case. Okay, cool. So as you can see, our gem is definitely spinning on the y-axis. And we're jumping through it just because there isn't actually a collider attached to it. But what we'll do now is add our collider to the gem, and also, more importantly, collect the item and destroy it. So let's grab our prefab. We have the spin still here. We'll leave the code within the spin and maybe rename it to, we'll just call it gem script. Okay, perfect. So to begin, first thing we need to do is grab our prefab, our gem here, go to component, physics, and now we're going to add a collider. Now, just for keepsake, we can add a box collider to it. So now you can see our box collider. That works pretty well. In a lot of game design development, you're really going to be working with geometric shapes. In this case, this box actually works out pretty well for us. If we wanted to make it maybe a little more isolated, we can probably use maybe a capsule, so you have to actually get into the center. I wouldn't recommend a mesh just because it takes a lot more computing to do a mesh. So this actually works better. And what we'll do is we'll actually make this a trigger, and I'll explain that a little later. But what this will do is anytime we touch the object, it's going to fire a trigger event, and that's what we're going to use to actually to detect when we're collecting the item. So let's. All right, so we'll begin with adding the trigger by writing the function on trigger enter wrong language. That's a little reminiscent of my ActionScript days, adding E. So basically what we're doing here is whenever we're listening really for the trigger event on trigger enter. So what we're going to do now is spell enter correctly. Enter, good. So what we're going to do now is just a simple debug .log. Let's say hit the gem, go back, hit play. As you can see, we just hit the gem. Perfect. Now we're going to go ahead and delete the object. And if you watch some of the previous videos, you would probably think if you just hit destroy, to ease, destroy, and you add C, which technically is our collider, right? That is going to destroy your object. But in reality, what that's going to do, hit play, get a running start. Can't. And can't remove character controller because character motor script depends on it. So you can't do that. So let's try maybe see that game object. That makes sense, right? Because we can get rid of the game object. So let's try this again. Hit play. And you notice the character disappears. So in this instance, because the gem is the trigger, we actually have to, instead of deleting the collider, which is actually who's colliding in our case, the ball is colliding with the gem. So this, if we want to maybe, if we have a function on the game object, maybe we can then use a collider to get access to the game object, and then maybe run a script on the game object or on the ball. But in this case, to destroy the actual gem, what we're going to do is something a little more simpler, and it's simply to call game object, just lowercase. Go back, hit play, running start, and boom, game object is off the stage. Alright, so we covered a lot in this video. We covered bringing an object from Maya and bringing it to Unity 3D. Instead of using our first player controller, we used the ball. We covered our camera controllers, or our camera scripts, follow and look at. We also covered how do you add a target to that camera. We also covered our mesh and adding a MeshCollider instead of just a box collider. And last but not least, our gem and our script on how to not only detect that we hit the gem, but also destroy the gem. So that's a lot that we covered. Definitely practice it. Next, we're going to discuss adding more of these prefabs onto the stage, maybe duplicating them and showing you really the power of prefabs, and also adding some more exciting elements. Remember, this whole series is all about adding depth to game development. So next video, we're going to discuss adding sound and particles. So definitely stay tuned. That should come out within the next few days, hopefully tomorrow. And we'll discuss adding sound and particles. So when you do collect your item, you hear a sound, and then you get a visual representation, which audio visual. We'll talk about those game dynamics next video. Till then, this is Edithson Abelard. I'm out.